This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get flat. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. Get flat. I got 6 jobs.
And we are still not tired on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner and fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, I got an objection. I told you to refer to me as the executive producer of the network, the fine producer of your 2 podcasts that you host here. Similar to the Kentucky Derby, I have to file an objection. I've told you this now for the better part of 120 episodes, and you still are not following through. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to have to reverse some things? Are we going to have to start the podcast, your podcast, with me opening? Maybe we'll do that. We'll reverse course, and
nobody will tune in.
Oh, that's what would happen, right?
Yeah, good luck to you with that.
Oh, man. So obviously we're referencing the biggest story of the sports week, the biggest objection ever filed in the history of horse racing. Now, I know you're a big jockey guy. I know you're a fan of jockeys.
You've seen me ride horses. I'm a big-time jockey. I could be a jockey, actually, at the Kentucky Derby one day.
See,
who knows, right?
Everybody's a fan of maximum security, feeling like he got screwed, but you're more sympathetic to the jockeys. I know that you're all about...
I'm a jockey kind of guy.
Exactly.
I just love myself a good-looking jockey.
What did you make of the biggest controversy in sports? Maximum security in the Kentucky Derby blew everybody away, wire to wire. He won the race, and he was able to handle his business and take care of what he was supposed to take care of. But after the race, everyone was celebrating. Those that bet maximum security were really happy. They thought, yeah, ching-ching, I cashed in. But eventually, an objection was filed by the second-place horse. And unfortunately, it took 20 minutes, a long time, kind of took the edge and the fun away from the Kentucky Derby. And they actually, for the first time in history, took a win away from a horse trainer and jockey. Maximum Security did not officially win the Kentucky Derby. Do you feel like replay ruined this event, and has replay ruined sports now, especially when it hits horse racing for the first time in the history of the running of the Kentucky Derby? The horse that, crossed that crossed the line first, not the winner.
Well, I guess Maximum Security did not have maximum security on that victory, or he would not have been disqualified. Honestly, I didn't watch this live. I found out about this after the fact. Maybe it was good. Maybe it was bad. I didn't watch it live. But I was at Comerica Park for the DSP network covering that great Tigers game, a 15-3 shellacking of the Tigers by the Royals. So was there handling my business and walking around Comerica Park on Saturday afternoon and into early Saturday evening instead of watching that terrific Kentucky Derby, which I know was really terrific. And I have watched the Derby in the past live with family and friends. This year, once again, did not happen to watch it live. Heard all about it. I know Maximum Security was disqualified. And it brings up a bigger issue and topic, and that has to deal with instant replay and the usage of it in pro sports from sport to sport, including now in the Kentucky Derby. And my logic regarding it, Doc, is that I'm all for it if you're going to get the call right subsequently by using and implementing instant replay. I just don't want these sporting events being dragged out because of the usage of instant replay. Because we see in the NFL, in basketball, in baseball, and other sports, these games are already long enough, especially in Major League Baseball, as you and I know real big time through covering the Tigers games and watching all these Tigers games throughout the season and other Major League Baseball action. That these games take already 3 hours plus on average, and we don't need them being dragged out any longer. And with the usage of instant replay once again, it seems like it's only delaying the action further. So I would like to get the calls right, but I think there's a better methodology and system for implementing and utilizing instant replay on an event-to-event basis.
Yeah, Vito, it's just a tough call because they got it right. Everyone that is a horse aficionado is saying, look, They got the call right. This happens all the time, but not on the biggest stage where all the eyes are watching. Most American fans watch horse racing for the events in the next coming weeks.
The Triple Crown, and that's
exactly.
it, right?
Exactly. And I just find it disappointing that this is what we're talking about. The Kentucky Derby, I think, was a little bit ruined. But, for me, I'm lucky in that I avoided making any bets. I did not bet any of the horses. I don't even know how to bet any of the horses. But imagine, Vito, if you took a chunk of change, you save it up, and you're on a good win streak, and you bet maximum security, you're riding high when he wins. You're excited. And then they take it away, and then that 20 minutes must have been like excruciating for those that maybe could have potentially won or lost six figures. It's a big deal. And I just don't like sporting events coming down to things like that. Replay should be there for everything, but really only for the most egregious situation. So, unfortunately, this is egregious. I mean, if there's a rule that says you have to be in your lane, you have to actually, quote-unquote, stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, like LeVar Ball said at one point.
If you got to stay in your lane and you don't.
Stay in your damn lane,
then
right?
stay in your damn lane.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the eye in the sky will never lie, and unless you're a Saints fan. And then
Yeah. Might have screwed them over a bit, huh? And they're still salty about that one. Jimmy Buffett just did something in honor of that egregious call.
But everyone listening, you can't have it both ways. You can't advocate for and scream about what happened to the Saints and then turn around and be against what happened to maximum security. Okay, you can't. What's right is right. And in both cases, the Saints, obviously there should have been a pass interference call, and with what happened to maximum security, he violated a rule and he should have been disqualified. And that's where we're going, is get it right. And if that's the plan, I'm down with it. It's just, they got to do it faster. I mean, literally.
That's the thing. How long is this going to take?
The people that are objecting are saying, look, the person that usually would see the situation and make the call didn't do it. It had to come, an objection had to come from
how
the horse.
long after, by the way?
How come the official didn't see it? How come she...
He or she should have seen it.
Yeah, push the button and right away realize, boom, it ends. You don't put, you don't celebrate the horse. You don't, boom, call it. You don't say anything. You say, okay, this race is going to be under objection. We saw something right away. 5 minutes. Okay, this is the rule. This is what happened. It can be done faster. And that's what we complain about, is these games in football, basketball, baseball are taking too long, when there's been some calls against Detroit teams where, hey, the rule of thumb is you got 90 seconds to review it, and 90 seconds passes, 100 seconds passes, 110 seconds pass, and they're still looking at it, and they get the call wrong.
Yeah, how long are we going here? Let's
Exactly.
not draw it out completely. Let's just get it right, and get it right more quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And for those fans that unfortunately had the winning ticket that they thought, too bad, so sad.
Don't really feel bad for those guys, because I didn't bet on this myself. Now, if I would have won through maximum security as well, I'd be feeling real bad or real salty right now with these officials that decided to turn this decision over, reverse the course on this decision after the fact. Like you said. So if you thought that maybe that horse, maximum security, jumped into somebody else's lane, as in did not stay in his own lane, you thought that at all, well, you put it up for objection, right? Then you review it right after the race ends, and you review it quickly, within a span of 5 to 10 minutes. You don't have this drawn out, because when you do, subsequently, a lot of times, you lose interest from the fans. And the fans start becoming more and more salty, start complaining on Twitter, start going after the refs, the officials, the people that make these calls officially. So you don't want that as a sport at any level where there's room for the fans to find some fault in your decision, even when you get it right. So just get it right quicker. And we need to see that, especially in Major League Baseball, but in all these different sports, as you already named and as I already called off. So basketball, football, horse racing now. We never thought it would go this deep and go to horse racing, but it has seeped to horse racing now. And let's just get it right all the time, and then there be no outcry moving forward. And honestly, that's what all these leagues, right? All these sports at every single level, they want to curtail. They want to curtail the complaining from the fans. And that's why you need the instant replay. But another way to maximize your viewability with the fans and your likability with the fans is to get these calls overturned quickly.
Now, this week, it was made official. On Tuesday, Ken Holland was officially named the general manager of the Oilers. And he left the Red Wings organization. He's been there damn near 4 decades. Been there quite a long time, working with the Red Wings, been a general manager, been a scout. He's been part of the organization literally for quite a long time. But now, no longer part of the organization. It really makes you question what really happened. in the scenario where Steve Yzerman comes. Did Ken Holland really call and inquire and really aid in the replacement of his own job? Especially when 2 weeks later, when you get a good offer from the Red Wings, you move up, you get to become the vice president, and you get probably a little bit of a bump and raise. Obviously, 5 years, $25 million, that's something serious, and you have an opportunity to be named president and general manager of the Oilers. But I look at it and I say, good for Ken Holland. It's always nice at times to take on a new challenge. I think the challenge is going to be really overwhelming for him. But at the same time, thank you for what you did. Thank you for your time with the Red Wings. The last 6-7 years probably will be regrettable when people look at the ending of the Ken Holland tenure. A lot of bad contracts. He basically recruited his boy, Steve Yzerman, to take the job. He left him with a super tough job of dealing with some of the bad contracts and some of the talent that I think when all is said and done and we review the video, we probably don't want around anymore.
And then Holland's going to the Oilers, who are in salary cap hell as well. So he put the Wings into salary cap hell, and now the Oilers also are. So why do the Oilers think that Ken Holland is the right guy to resolve their issues with the salary cap?
Well, experience. He has been a general manager for a better part of 20 years plus, and you can't beat experience, and you can't beat, even though the last few seasons have been a disaster for the Red Wings, there's still Dylan Larkin on the team. There's still Athanasiou on the team. There's still guys that
Anthony Mantha, right, as
there
well.
There are guys that potentially have talent. He was able to orchestrate the Thomas Tatar trade, which brought the Red Wings more picks. So when he actually delved into a rebuild, when he finally accepted it, some moves were made that were complimentary and decent. Now, does it balance out the bad contracts that he gave out? No. It's super tough in a salary cap era where 2 bad contracts hinders your team for a while. That Abdelkader and Helm contract, Franz Nielsen, those contracts are really saddling and hindering the Detroit Red Wings. So you got to be really, really careful with each and every contract that you give. And I think he learned that lesson quite quickly that, oh boy, part of the reason why the Wings didn't make the playoffs for 3 consecutive years is because the team wasn't good enough, and some of the contracts and some of the talent that were passed on and versus some of the talent that are on the roster wasn't the right fit. And unfortunately, I think that he needed to make a couple more bold moves. He only really made a couple, and I think that Ken Holland will be remembered more for some of the bad contracts in the salary cap era than the credit he will get for the cups because he had an open checkbook. But I still will give him credit for the ability to spend with an open checkbook. He won the cups. They're on his resume. And so to answer your question, the reason why the Oilers want him, they look at that resume. 4 Stanley Cups, 3 as general manager, over 20 years experience running a team with the Detroit Red Wings, an original 6 franchise. There's a lot of good on that resume. And sometimes, Vito, naturally speaking, it happens. You're in a job for 15, 20 years. You're just not as motivated as you would be maybe when you get a new challenge, okay? Let's say you've done 5,000 podcasts, and then, there's an opportunity then to start your own thing. I think then the first handful of episodes you do on your own you might be reinvigorated. You might look at something different. You might add video. You might add your own studio. You might not want all this. You might just want a nice mahogany table. You want to sit with scotch, and you come in here and tell me what I want to hear, but you really want a simple, maybe someone like yourself just want a little circle table with a chair and have that intimate feel with dark lights, and you don't want all this lights. But when you get your own thing, you're reinvigorated with your own thing, and you act differently. And it doesn't mean that you were lesser of a podcast than you are here. It just means that you got a new challenge, a new opportunity, and in your own way, you set up an environment that you want. And I think Ken Holland will be someone that brings stability to Edmonton, and at least, the bar is pretty low.
It is over there, right?
12 of 13 years not in the playoffs. So if you get him to the playoffs 4 years in a row, he might be the king of Edmonton.
He got 5 years, $5 million per season, I believe. So a long enough leash.
He'll get 4 years minimum. I think the first couple of years he'll have to figure stuff out, but then year 3, 4, and 5, he's got to produce.
Here's another question for you, though. Was that playoff streak towards the end worth it for the Wings?
No.
A lot of people say no, so you say no.
Mistake.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because I think it from an outsider, not an in-depth Red Wings fan and aficionado. It looked like at the end he should have been rebuilding that. He didn't rebuild quickly enough. Instead, try to prolong that playoff streak for no good reason because they weren't winning cups at that point, right? They weren't good enough to win cups the last, 3, 4, 5 years of that playoff streak. So that playoff streak, if he really would have rebuilt the franchise the right way, would have happened earlier than it did.
Yeah.
And I know you and Adam probably have talked about this ad nauseum too on Doc and Jock in the past.
The best part of Twitter is I went on Twitter, and the Edmonton Oilers announced that Ken Holland was the new general manager and president. I wrote one word: sorry.
Sorry for those Oiler fans who think they're getting a great GM. And hey, he won 3 cups still as GM. But then you look at his scouting days. He was a North American scout. And look, I did my research on the Wings. I'm not really the guy that's always in tune with the Wings. But I know he was a North American scout. And when he was, before he became GM, Doc, he didn't really scout or have the Wings through his services and help draft the greatest guys from North America. So there's that, which is also a detriment to his legacy with the Wings. Won the 3 cups, but then signed plenty of bad contracts. And the one that sticks out to me and to the masses is the Johan Franzen contract.
That's
he
what
had
Jason
signed
said.
Hossa, but then he signed Franzen when he could have re-signed Hossa long-term. Maybe not for as long as he signed Franzen for, but the Franzen one definitely sticks out and screams to me that Holland made a super huge mistake there. And it was one of a few and really many bad signings that Ken Holland made in his last decade, right? His last decade as GM, I think you could say, of the Wings.
See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya, Ken Holland. Unfortunately, you got a tough job.
Yeah,
Look,
not with those Oilers.
but-
Not right now.
But he's got a superstar, Connor McDavid. If he can stay healthy, that's a good starting spot, right? That's a good starting spot to have one of the best elite talent in the world. And Ken Holland's got a job to do. He's got to get that draft working, and he has to also deal with the emotion that he's dealing with when you've been with a job for that many decades. To start something brand new, it's going to be something different, and he's got to be able to rally the troops a little bit and pick a staff that's going to be successful because, man, management with the Oilers has been rough for many years, according to what I'm seeing here online. But what's the fairest way that you can sum up the tenure that Ken Holland had with the Detroit Red Wings?
Good for the first decade, not so good for the last decade. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Overall wise,
grade.
though, overall grade, he deserves a B. How about that, though? Right? And ask that question on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. I think you are right now typing that in on Twitter for us. I think it's a worthwhile question to ask the masses, our Twitter audience, because I think a lot of people will give us varying opinions. It won't be the same opinion given by each and every single follower we have on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. As I think you're going to get some people that are the contrarians that view him more negatively, that give him a C or less. But I truly think anybody that gives him lower than a C is not thinking correctly either, though. Because remember, he won the 3 cups when there was more ability to sign the big names because there was more access to open up the checkbook at one point. He was signing the big names, right? They were coming here, and maybe because of Mr. I and because of what the Wings had built up previously. But still, Ken Holland recruited and brought those guys in as GM, had some iconic teams, some of the greatest teams in NHL history that he won with. It's just in the second half of his tenure as GM with the Wings, he made some bad signings and did not start over soon enough, did not start that rebuild quickly enough, and that will always be a part of his legacy with the Wings.
All right, quick timeout. Give love to a great sponsor of the network, DC Sports, over there at Lakeside Mall. Second half of the podcast, I couldn't believe you put that on the sheet, Vito. An older veteran is being recruited potentially by the Detroit Pistons. When I saw that, Pistons Twitter is great. I love those guys. They're young, they're passionate, they're energetic, they're doing podcasts. I love it. I love Pistons Twitter. But to see Derrick Rose on a jersey with the Pistons had me dying. Had me absolutely dying. And we'll talk about our reaction to it next, right after this.
Derrick Rose is no longer the best of the best. Now, DC Sports is for authentic memorabilia. And DC Sports, with its fine location at Lakeside Mall, stands out among the pack when it comes to all of your Detroit sports memorabilia needs. And it's all authentic once again. And so many athletes and former athletes have come in to the confines of DC Sports at Lakeside Mall for signings in the past and will be in the very near future as well at Lakeside Mall, including this Saturday. It is Mr. Tiger himself who is joining the fray at DC Sports for a signing. So make sure you check out more details about that very signing at our Twitter page of at Detroit Podcast. Also at Detroit City Sports' terrific website at DetroitCitySports.com and at its Twitter handle of DC Sports Detroit. And back here on Two Bad Hombres, and as I said before the break, we have to get into the Pistons are looking into an over-the-hill veteran point guard in Derrick Rose to fill a supposed need, maybe the backup spot that Ish Smith has filled the role of, you could say, I think, superbly in recent memory. Really good this past season. And honestly, I think you can agree, Doc, better than Reggie Jackson at times. And in crunch time, where Reggie was on the bench, they had Ish Smith in the game at the end, and he was nailing baskets. Not Reggie Jackson, the guy they've been paying all this big money for, who hasn't stayed healthy throughout a season, despite what he did this past season. I know he stayed healthy this past season. Okay, Pistons fans, don't come at me now and at me about that. But Reggie Jackson overpaid, overvalued. Ish Smith, undervalued, underappreciated, and now he might be on his way out as a free agent. Derrick Rose coming in to fill the void, Doc. What do you think about that possibility?
It's the sorriest thing I've seen in a long time because what would end up happening? I mean, we're going to rely on Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin to consistently
And
stay
Reggie,
healthy.
who's staying healthy?
Who's staying
among that group, right? And at point guard, but when you consider their supposed best players, which you have to throw in Blake Griffin, and he's the best player on the Pistons roster right now. Derrick Rose would be one of the top 3, top 5 players on that team. Reggie gets hurt, not this past season once again, but in the seasons before this past season, has been a guy that has been injury prone. Let's say he goes down, succumbs to injury. Derrick Rose does too. Who's playing point guard then for the Pistons, who are supposedly contending for a playoff spot? Right?
It's
Who's the
thumbs
point
down.
guard then?
I couldn't
Should
believe.
Should be at least one,
Okay.
and you could argue 2 thumbs down. I know you're going to argue for 2 thumbs down for the potential signing of Derrick Rose.
My 2 thumbs, your 2 thumbs, and Adam's 2 thumbs. 6 thumbs down for Derrick Rose.
I'll
Look,
do one. Only one for me, and I'll tell you why in a second, though.
Okay. Here's
Go
the
on.
reason. Okay, yes, he's injury prone. Yes, that he does bring some baggage that we don't like. But even when I look at what Derrick Rose could bring, I think that we need a version of Derrick Rose, but a lot younger. Some energy, some youthful energy, someone that can come in and lead this team. And I say, find that person in the draft. When you tank, you maybe can find someone that's young and a little bit more affordable. Would you be willing to pay, like, what, 10, 12, $15 million for Derrick Rose? That would be horrendous. I wouldn't
I
want
would
to
hope
invest
they
that
would
money.
not have to pay him that much money.
They're-
If
they're-
you could get him for 5 to 7, $7.5 million, I'd do it.
That's what pisses me off regarding all this talk about Mike Conley. They want to drop
Oh my
$30
God.
million.
Way too much money for a guy that's
Yeah.
older. Was good last year, but injury prone now too. Doesn't it concern you when he's injury prone and he's not getting any younger?
I think everybody's so hopeful and they want to deny history. Like even with Blake Griffin, the last 2 years when you needed Blake Griffin, obviously everyone gives him credit for the wins, but nobody wants to give him any blame or get frustrated for the fact that he's injury prone and actually got injured. So I'm of the opinion that pass on Derrick Rose. I'm of the opinion that if you can sell high on Blake Griffin and then sell high on Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, blow this thing up and the fans will be happy. You'll rejuvenate a fan base if you actually rebuild this the right way with talent, more talented individuals that fit a scheme. What eventually is going to happen, though, and to get back to reality, is what the Pistons are going to do is probably move Reggie. They're going to slowly but surely disintegrate this. Not all in one bomb. They're going to do it piece by piece. And I just think that the fans are ready to move on from Andre and Reggie Jackson. They're okay with Blake Griffin because he's got talent, but I don't think you can build fast enough to be able to utilize his talent. He might be 33, 34 by the time the Pistons could be a perennial winner, and that's just too late. I just don't see it. So sell high now, get the first-round draft picks, maybe get 2, 3 of them. Hey, maybe just get some salary relief, whatever you can do in terms of starting over, officially starting over. That's the biggest problem, is that the Pistons and the fans realize they're not doing anything. They're just spinning their wheels like a hamster.
Light a fire on this Pistons franchise, disintegrate it.
Yeah.
But you know what? The problem with Derrick Rose, he's been injury prone. He's an aging vet who had a good season, though, this past year. That's why it's only 1 thumbs down for me, 1 thumb down, because of the fact he had a season in which he averaged 18-something points per game, Doc. And if you get that kind of production off the bench from a guy that has been an MVP guy in the past, now before injuries and multiple injuries and leg injuries, well, you're getting some value and some bang for your buck. It's just how much you have to pay this guy to come to Motown. If you have to overpay for this guy to come and be a backup primarily for your squad throughout the 2019-2020 campaign, then it's not worth it to bring in Derrick Rose, who once again is an aging vet, stayed relatively healthy for himself, played in 51 games this past season. But moving forward, can you bank on him playing in 50-plus games? I'm not going to say in 50-plus games. Hell no. And regarding your conversation about Andre Drummond and the Pistons fans wanting him dealt, you and I want him dealt. But there's still that small hope with some of the Pistons fans that he stays and he becomes an even better all-around player. There is still that vocal minority, and we see it among the young Pistons fans that want to see more Andre, because they just can't get enough out of Dre for some odd reason. He's a great rebounder, recorded all these double-doubles this past season, and he was like the leader in double-doubles or top 3 in double-doubles this past season, behind maybe, I don't know, Russell Westbrook and guys like him and Giannis, the Greek freak that is, for the Bucks, who swept and wiped the floor clean with the Pistons in the first round in the playoffs. But they still want Andre to be on this team. They want him to be a focal point on this team. I just don't view him as a guy that can be a focal point on a true contender in the NBA. Not with the current NBA landscape. He does not fit the mold of a current 5, of a guy that can play fast, move up and down the floor, provide consistent energy and effort on both ends. As he does it night to night, provide effort on both ends, and specifically on the defensive end. And then when it comes to the offensive end, he's a limited dude. Doesn't have much of a back-to-the-basket game, meaning you're overpaying for this guy. You're not getting as much value out of him as Tom Gores and as his vocal minority thinks it is out of Dre. It's just not the case, and that's why I would be fine with moving on from him. But once again, there is still that vocal minority, Doc, and we've seen it ourselves on Twitter, at Detroit Podcast, that wants to see Andre Drummond stay on this Pistons roster for the foreseeable future.
Before we get out of here, I'll ask you this. Which team, if you were to relegate them, the Pistons, Lions, Tigers, and Red Wings, you can no longer support them, and you find that it's too much, it's too frustrating, it's not worth your time, not worth what's going to probably come back, I think the Pistons are the team that you would relegate emotionally. They're not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, and I think they got the worst reputation in terms of the least amount of credibility that any of the fans would have for the owner. I feel like I've never really seen an owner being talked about along the lines of what people will say about Tom Gores, throwing the T-shirts, maybe some of the ways in which he conducts himself, how he carries himself.
I mean, you didn't enjoy that? The T-shirt toss?
No, I don't think so. I want an owner that understands what it takes to win. Not just say it, not just say, oh, getting to the playoffs is important. I want an owner that says, I will find anybody. If it's Chauncey Billups, if it's Magic Johnson, if it's anybody that has credibility that can actually go out there and has a ring on his finger that can get us a title, I will do that. And I think the guy that he should go out and look at is Chauncey Billups. He
For
should
sure.
take a
Slam dunk option right now.
Slam dunk option is to go out there and get new management to go out here and build this team. Nobody trusts Ed Stefanski. What's he really done across the NBA in terms of building sustainable success, championship-level teams? Yeah, he's okay. Yeah, I think he can get you a team that can get to the playoffs, but can he make shrewd moves? Can he handle the business? Can he trade Blake Griffin? Can he start and actually talk to Tom and say, look, the fans don't like this. The fans are talking pretty much negatively. You got a group of people that support the Pistons, but that's not enough to put asses in the seats.
How many, though? How many are coming to the games, though?
Exactly.
The thing is, you can support the Pistons on Twitter. Okay?
Yeah.
Are you paying for tickets, though? These young guys can't afford the tickets at Little Caesars Arena, nor should they be spending their money on those tickets at LCA. And they're just not. It's not happening. So you're not getting butts in the seats at LCA on a regular game-to-game basis. And I think, Doc, and not to cut you off here as I just did, really, but until you trade Drummond and Reggie Jackson, you're not going to fill the stands at Little Caesars Arena.
Who did a worse job at the end of his tenure, Joe Dumars or Ken Holland?
Wow, that's a good topic. Did you ask that on Twitter, by the way?
Not yet, no.
At Detroit Podcast? You got to pose that one. That's pretty interesting. See, I don't know as much about the Wings, but I would say, because I know more about the Pistons, and subsequently would go with Joe D, because he made a lot of bad draft picks all throughout his tenure with the Pistons, too. And he didn't retool the Pistons the right way. He tried to retool the Pistons on the fly instead of rebuilding the Pistons. Then he signed Charlie Villanueva, that is, and Josh Smith to outlandish long-term deals. Those deals backfired hugely with the team and the product on the floor, but also with the fans and PR-wise, because those guys never amounted to anything in Pistons unis. So I would have to go with Joe D. How about you? It's a tough call, man, isn't it? It's a good question. That's why you got to pose that one on Twitter, too.
I think the fans will vote, by and large, Ken Holland.
I think so, too?
Yeah, because of the fact that
they had that playoff
term,
streak for longer, though.
That's right.
You can use that in favor of Holland and Joe D, who they weren't making the playoffs there for a while. We know that much.
I think it's a tough call, Vito.
It is.
Ken Holland, man, not staying with Hosa, some of the long-term bad deals, trading
Abdelkader, too.
The Legwan trade, man, some draft picks that he made are really highly questionable. Bringing back Thomas Vanek 2 times in a time when most people say, just play the young cats.
It's a veteran. Actually, one time, right? You bring him in the first time.
Mike Green, Vanek. He just tried to build in a way that was not successful. So I think Ken Holland did a little bit worse job than Joe Dumars did. Joe Dumars, you got to remember too, built a team that actually won and got to the conference final 6 years in a row. But eventually, what both general managers are going to realize is the skill level that it takes to run a draft, you got to keep up with. If you don't keep up with how to draft properly, you could set your franchise back 5 to 10 years and really stall a rebuild. So both guys, I think it'll be interesting to see what the fans say.
And then neither of them rebuilt the right way. Each of them, like you said, you pointed it out with the Red Wings, try to sign veterans still and try to mix in those vets with the young guys. So subsequently, not effectively rebuilding your respective roster and franchise. Now, somebody that never had a rebuild because they had a great roster of talent for 10 years was the TV show Friends. I want to leave everybody with this. Did you know, I don't know if you even realize this, Doc, but the series finale of Friends, which I actually watched the reruns on Netflix, I binge-watched to catch up on all 10 seasons of the show. The series finale of the show aired 15 years ago, specifically on May 6th of 2004. How about that, Doc? And did you watch Friends, by the way?
I did. 15 years, huh? Wow.
15 years ago
wow.
already.
Wow.
Isn't that something, man? And that was such an iconic series because it was an ensemble cast. Nobody was bigger than the other, even though Jennifer Aniston grew as time went on and became this big-time movie star, and after the show, obviously, as well. And she's become the biggest since the show ended in 2004. She played Rachel, obviously. And the show was centered around, though, Ross and Monica Geller. Those two were the two kind of the main series stars, even though, remember, everybody in that cast was so good, it was an ensemble cast. And that show won its fair share of Emmys, and each and every single one of those members of that cast was around for all 10 years and was so valuable to the show being such an iconic series from start to finish. And I hope one day this podcast can be viewed as an iconic podcast. How about that? At least locally, we can get it to that level one day.
Vito, one day? I think we're there. I think people do understand what we've done in terms of building this thing into a profitable entity.
Well, I'm saying Two Bad Hombres. I'm saying this.
This
not
one
the
show?
network, this one show.
Oh, this one
Might
show.
be a stretch. I think Doc's pretty much saying right now,
That's
that
gonna
could
be
be
a
a stretch, though.
That's gonna be a stretch.
But the podcast network as an entity, different story. We've already built a brand, and now we're just continuously building up that brand even further, right? And that's the aim moving forward here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Okay, give me your idea right off the cuff. How would you make this Two Bad Hombres podcast gain an even bigger platform than we already got?
Get rid of you and add somebody else to be my Bad Hombre partner. But besides for that happening, which isn't going to happen, and I don't want it happening, actually, because John Macron is a good guy and a good producer, and he's the executive producer of this podcast network. He does everything at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network as a co-founder and co-owner. But enough of me bowing down to John Macron and genuflecting towards him, because I want to say that I think a way in which to make this product even better, just hopefully landing more guests in studio. I would like that. I'm always more of the in-studio guy. I know we have the capability of over the phone,
I think it might happen
too.
soon, yep.
And we can do over the phone, but I would like to do a podcast remotely, too.
Yep.
From Tap and Barrel, one of our fine sponsors. We love Matt Aubrey, who just had a kid, and congrats to him. And maybe doing a recording remotely from Tap and Barrel Grill. How about that? And maybe also, like I said, incorporating more in-studio guests, too. Those are two elements that I would like to add to Two Bad Hombres moving forward, and could maybe one day, just one day, make Two Bad Hombres stand out among the pack and make the show iconic.
I just sent you a link. We'll tease it. I just saw on Facebook that 250 family video stores that you see all over town, they're going to start carrying CBD products. I just sent you the link.
Really?
Yeah, we'll check that out next
Cannabis
week.
and marijuana, that is, right?
I
CBD?
think so. We'll check
Really?
that. We'll check that out. CBD. We'll investigate it, and we'll bring you a lot more regarding the world of social media, entertainment, sports on the next edition of Two Bad Hombres. Follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Feel free to leave a voicemail 248-579-8686. We appreciate all the engagement. Thanks, everybody.
And John, follow the podcast at Two Bad Hombres, the numeral 2, then Bad Hombres. Adios.